On a humid August morning in 2024, Miami authorities were called to a luxurious apartment in Brickell. What they found there would forever change the lives of a family in Russia and shock Miami's international student community. Katerina Volkov, an 18-year-old student at the University of Miami, had vanished without a trace in circumstances that initially appeared to be a voluntary disappearance. But as investigators delved deeper into her digital life, a dark web of secrets, manipulation and exploitation began to emerge. Katerina's last social media post, published just 48 hours before her disappearance, showed her smiling in an expensive South Beach restaurant wearing a designer dress that cost more than her monthly scholarship. The caption read, "Living the dream. So blessed. Life in Miami." What her friends and family didn't know was that behind that perfect image lay a much darker reality. A young dreamer. Katerina had arrived in the United States in August 2023, full of hope and determination. The daughter of a public school teacher and a nurse in Moscow, she had won a partial scholarship to study computer science at the prestigious University of Miami. She was the first person in her family to study abroad, carrying not only her own dreams but the expectations of an entire community that had invested in her education. She was bright, determined and incredibly hardworking, recalls Dmitry Volkov, her father, in an emotional video call interview from Moscow. Katerina always said she would go to America and do something big. We never imagined that this is how she would make headlines. Katerina's first few months in Miami were exactly as she had imagined. Her grades were excellent. She had joined the university's programming club, and she had formed solid friendships with other international students. Her video calls home were full of enthusiasm as she described campus life, inspiring professors, and the endless opportunities Miami had to offer. But there was a growing problem that Katerina tried to hide from her family. Money, financial pressure. The financial pressure. Despite her scholarship, the cost of living in Miami was astronomical for a young woman from a middle-class family in Russia. The rent for her small room in a shared apartment in Coral Gables consumed more than half of her allowance. Books, food, transportation, clothes suitable for the hot Miami climate, everything cost much more than she had anticipated. She started mentioning that things were more expensive than she expected, says Ana Rodriguez, her roommate and fellow international student from Colombia. But Katerina was proud. She didn't want to worry her family or seem like she couldn't handle independence. To compensate, Katerina started working part-time at a coffee shop near campus, which was allowed under her student visa. But even with the extra work, she could barely cover her basic expenses. As she watched classmates from wealthier families enjoy expensive dinners, designer shopping, and weekend trips to the Keys, Katerina felt increasingly isolated and pressured. It was in this state of financial and emotional vulnerability that she met Marcus Wellington. The encounter that changed everything. The first contact happened in a seemingly innocent way in October 2023. Katerina was studying in the university library when her old, slow laptop finally stopped working during a crucial programming session for an important project. Frustrated and on the verge of tears, she couldn't afford repairs, let alone a new computer. She was approached by a well-dressed man who had observed her situation. "Sorry to bother you, but I noticed you're having trouble with your laptop," he said, introducing himself as Marcus Wellington, a 45-year-old tech entrepreneur. Elegant in his tailored linen suit and exuding confidence, Marcus offered immediate help. "I know a great repair shop nearby. How about I take a look?" What could have been just a kind gesture from a well-meaning stranger turned out to be the first carefully calculated move by an experienced predator. Not only did Marcus arrange for Katerina's laptop to be repaired the same day, something that would normally take a week, but he also refused to accept any payment. "Consider it a small contribution to education," he said with a warm smile. "I love supporting bright young people in their academic journeys." The first seeds of manipulation. In the days following their chance encounter at the library, Marcus began to appear more and more in Katerina's life. First, it was a message on Instagram congratulating her on an academic presentation she had mentioned. Then an invitation to coffee, as mentors do with promising students, at a fancy cafe in Coconut Grove. During that first official coffee, Marcus introduced himself as a successful investor in tech startups, someone who had started from scratch and now devoted part of his time to identifying and nurturing young talent. He demonstrated impressive knowledge of Katerina's field of study and asked insightful questions about her projects and career ambitions. "He seemed genuinely interested in my future," Katerina had told her friend Sofia Martinez a few weeks later. "Not like those guys who only want one thing." Marcus talked about internship opportunities, industry connections, how I could stand out in such a competitive field. Marcus was meticulous in his approach. He never made obvious romantic advances initially. Instead, he positioned himself as a mentor, a protector, someone who understood the unique challenges international students faced. He talked about his own immigrant journey, even though he was a third-generation American, and how he had learned to navigate Miami's elite circles. The subtle escalation. During November, Katerina and Marcus's meetings became more frequent. Always in public and respectable places, fancy restaurants, art galleries, tech networking events. Marcus gradually introduced Katerina to a world she had never imagined accessing. Dinners at upscale waterfront restaurants, exclusive events at elite co-working spaces, informal meetings with other young entrepreneurs. For a young woman who had grown up middle class in Moscow and now struggled to pay for student pizzas, this world was as exciting as it was intimidating. Marcus always insisted on paying for everything, but in an elegant way, never making Katerina feel like charity. He had a way of making it all seem natural, recalls Anna, her roommate. Katerina would come home with new clothes, talking about important people she had met, incredible opportunities that were coming her way, and it was always, Marcus introduced me to, or, Marcus suggested that. Marcus's psychological manipulation was subtle but systematic. He alternated between boosting Katerina's self-esteem, praising her intelligence, ambition, and unique potential, and creating emotional dependence. He began to suggest that other students and teachers did not truly understand her value, that she was different and special in ways that only someone with his experience could recognize. A life transformed. By December 2023, 3 months after meeting Marcus Wellington, Katerina Volkov's life had changed dramatically. What began as occasional mentoring meetings had evolved into something much more complex and dangerous. It was like watching someone being enveloped by a fog, described Sofia Martinez, one of the few close friends Katerina kept during this period. At first, she was just excited to have met someone important. But then gradually she started to distance herself from all of us. The first significant change was financial. Marcus had started offering increasingly extravagant gifts, always wrapped in seemingly innocent justifications. A new iPhone because a tech student needs the best tools, an expensive summer wardrobe because I can't let such a talented young woman not look the part in Miami, money for books as an investment in her bright future. Each gift came with a rational explanation and a paternal smile from Marcus. He had an impressive ability to make Katerina feel special for deserving his generosity while simultaneously creating an emotional debt that she unconsciously felt. The introduction of the apartment. The turning point came in January 2024 when Marcus made an offer that would completely change the dynamics of their relationship. During dinner at a fancy Italian restaurant in Brickell, he casually mentioned that he had an extra apartment in the design district that was just gathering dust. "Listen, Katerina, I've been watching how you've been struggling with the living conditions in Coral Gables," he said, his voice laden with genuine concern. "That apartment is available. It has 24-hour security. It's close to campus. Why don't you consider moving there? It would be much more convenient for your studies." When Katerina protested that she couldn't afford the rent for an apartment in the design district, Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about that. Consider it part of the mentoring program. Young talent needs the right environment to flourish." The apartment was everything Katerina had dreamed of, spacious, modern with a view of Biscayne Bay. Compared to the cramped little room she shared in Coral Gables, it was like a palace. Marcus arranged for the move at the end of January, insisting on paying for furniture and even a new wardrobe suitable for professional networking. The isolation begins. With the move to the new apartment, Marcus subtly introduced rules and expectations that began to isolate Katerina from her previous support systems. He suggested she spend less time wasting energy on people who don't understand her ambitions, and more time focusing on real opportunities for growth. He never directly told her to stop seeing us, recalls Ana Rodriguez, her former roommate. But suddenly Katerina was always busy with some important event Marcus had organized. She always had a new excuse for not showing up to our usual get-togethers. Marcus also began introducing the idea of professional discretion. He explained that given his status in the business community, it was important that his mentoring program not be misinterpreted by people who didn't understand complex professional relationships. Katerina should keep their meetings and her new living situation private, especially from her family in Russia. "You don't want your parents to worry unnecessarily," he argued. "They may not understand how professional connections work here in the United States. It's better to spare them the confusion." The first intimate request. In February 2024, Marcus finally revealed the true nature of what he was building. During an evening at his apartment, a Coconut Grove mansion that cost more in monthly rent than Katerina's family earned in a year, he made his first direct request. "Katerina, you are a beautiful and intelligent young woman," he said as he poured expensive wine after dinner. "And I am a man who appreciates beauty and intelligence. We have a special connection, don't we? Why don't we explore that more deeply?" When Katerina hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the change in direction, Marcus immediately changed tactics. He didn't press her physically but emotionally. He talked about how he had invested in her, about the incredible opportunities that were yet to come, about how special people like them had relationships that were different from the conventional. "I'm not talking about anything sordid," he reassured her, sensing her resistance. "I'm talking about a mature, mutually beneficial relationship. You continue to focus on your studies. I continue to provide support and guidance, just with a more personal dimension, the escalation of control." After that conversation, the dynamic between Marcus and Katerina changed irreversibly. Although she did not immediately agree to his more intimate requests, Marcus had planted the seed of a new reality. He began to be more explicit about his expectations in exchange for his support. He established regular times for them to meet. Initially, these were innocent dinners, but they gradually evolved into expectations that she would spend entire nights at his apartment. Marcus developed an elaborate system of emotional rewards and punishments based on her availability and appreciation. She started mentioning that Marcus got upset when she wasn't available, says Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, a counselor at the University of Miami Mental Health Center that Katerina had briefly sought out in March. She described feelings of guilt when she disappointed someone who had done so much for her. These are classic signs of psychological manipulation. Marcus also introduced an element of surveillance disguised as care. He installed security apps on Katerina's phone, supposedly for her protection as a young woman living alone in Miami. He wanted to know where she was, who she was talking to, how she spent her time when they weren't together. The financial aspect intensifies. As February turned into March, Marcus became more direct about the transactional aspect of their relationship. He began giving Katerina regular allowances, initially $2,000 per week, then increasing to $3,500, in exchange for her company and discretion. "It's just recognition for your time," he explained. "Successful people value quality relationships, and you deserve to be valued." The money was tempting for a student who had struggled financially, but it came with invisible strings attached. Marcus laid down rules about how the money should be spent, insisting that she buy certain clothes, frequent certain beauty salons, and maintain certain standards of appearance that he approved of. He also began to use the money as a form of emotional control. If Katerina questioned any of his demands or tried to maintain boundaries, Marcus would become disappointed and reduce or completely suspend his financial support, reminding her of all the opportunities she would be missing out on. The ignored warning signs. During this period, several people close to Katerina tried to express concerns, but she had become skilled at deflecting questions. When her family asked about her new expensive clothes and improved lifestyle during video calls, she credited additional scholarships and freelance work opportunities. "We knew something was wrong," said Professor James Mitchell, her academic advisor, who noticed changes in Katerina's behavior and priorities. Her grades were still good, but she seemed distracted, stressed. When I asked if she needed any support, she always said everything was fine, that she was just exploring networking opportunities. What no one knew was that Marcus had become increasingly possessive and controlling. He monitored Katerina's activities, discouraged relationships he didn't approve of, and gradually created a world where she depended completely on him for validation, financial security, and social guidance. By March 2024, Katerina Volkov had become completely entangled in the web carefully constructed by Marcus Wellington. What she didn't know was that other young women had gone through the same process before her, and that Marcus had much more sinister plans for the future of their relationship. The discovery that changed everything. On August 10, 2024, just 1 week before her disappearance, Katerina Volkov made a discovery that would completely change her perception of Marcus Wellington and put her in mortal danger. It all started with a seemingly insignificant mistake. Marcus had forgotten his laptop at her apartment after one of his regular nighttime visits. Initially, Katerina had no intention of violating his privacy. She just wanted to return the device when Marcus returned. But when a pop-up notification appeared on the screen showing a message from a young Asian woman with a profile picture that said, "I need to talk about the money you owe me," her curiosity was piqued. What Katerina discovered upon further investigation made her blood run cold. Marcus's laptop contained a meticulously organized folder titled Special Projects, which revealed the true extent of his predatory activities. The multiple victim system. The files revealed that Katerina was not even remotely the first young international student Marcus had mentored. In fact, she found evidence of at least 7 other young women over the past 3 years, all international students between the ages of 18 and 22, all from middle-class families in developing countries, all initially approached under the guise of professional mentoring. There were photos, text conversations, detailed financial records, and even intimate videos that Marcus had collected without the young women's knowledge. Each relationship followed a pattern almost identical to what Katerina had experienced. The casual encounter, the trust-building phase, the gradual isolation, the free apartment, and finally the transition to sexual expectations in exchange for financial support. It was like reading about my own life, but multiplied by 7, Katerina later told Sofia Martinez during a desperate phone call. Every conversation, every gift, every promise, he had used exactly the same tactics with all of us. The fate of the others. Even more disturbing were the discoveries about what had happened to her predecessors. 2 young women had disappeared after trying to confront Marcus about the relationship. One had supposedly returned home due to family emergencies. Another had transferred to a university on the West Coast, but Marcus's record suggested something far more sinister. In text conversations with an unidentified associate, Marcus casually discussed methods for solving problems when his girls became problematic or uncooperative. There were veiled references to permanent solutions and necessary relocations. One particularly shocking folder contained documents about Elena Petrov, a 19-year-old Ukrainian student who had vanished without a trace 6 months earlier in February 2024. Officially, she was believed to have returned to Ukraine, but Marcus's files contained references to international arrangements and contacts in Eastern Europe involved in human trafficking. The blackmail system. Katerina also discovered that Marcus had installed hidden cameras in her apartment, cameras she never knew existed. He had recorded all her intimate moments, phone conversations with her family, and even her private reactions of distress as she struggled with her situation. These videos were not just for his personal pleasure. Marcus used them as blackmail material. There was evidence that he threatened to send intimate videos to families, universities, and future employers if any of his victims tried to expose him or escape his influence. He had created a perfect system. He specifically chose vulnerable young people from conservative cultures where sexual shame would be devastating, Detective Maria Santos, who investigated the case, later explained. It was an almost inescapable psychological prison. The fatal decision to confront him. After discovering Marcus's true nature, Katerina spent 2 days in shock, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. She considered several options: going to the police, contacting the other victims, fleeing home. But Marcus had been careful in his legal manipulations, and Katerina knew it would be her word against that of a well-connected and respected man. On August 15, she made the decision that would lead to her kidnapping: to confront Marcus directly and demand that he stop his predatory activities. She called me the night before, recalled Sofia Martinez. She was determined but scared. She said she had discovered terrible things about Marcus and was going to confront him. I tried to dissuade her, but she said she couldn't live knowing that other girls would go through the same thing she had. The confrontation. On the afternoon of August 16, 2024, Katerina met Marcus at his mansion in Coconut Grove. She had carefully prepared her approach, documenting all the evidence she had found and sending copies to Sofia as a precaution. According to the building security cameras, Katerina arrived at Marcus's residence at 3:30 p.m., appearing calm but determined. What happened over the next 3 hours was only later reconstructed through forensic evidence and audio recordings that Katerina had secretly made on her phone. Marcus initially tried to deny the accusations, then downplay them as misunderstandings. When Katerina threatened to go to the police and expose the entire scheme, including her evidence about Elena and the other victims, Marcus's behavior changed completely. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," he said, his voice becoming cold and threatening. "I have connections you can't even imagine. I can make your life and your family's life very difficult." The abduction. When Katerina stood firm in her decision to expose Marcus, he realized he had lost the psychological control he had always maintained over his victims. By 6 p.m., the situation had escalated to physical violence. Later, forensic evidence showed signs of a struggle in Marcus's mansion. Furniture was overturned, glass was broken, and most significantly, there was evidence that sedatives had been forcibly administered. Marcus had prepared a syringe containing a powerful sedative mixture. When Katerina tried to leave the mansion, he overpowered her and injected the substance. The last recordings on Katerina's phone, discovered days later by investigators, capture the terrifying moments of her abduction. Her voice, growing weaker due to the drugs, still tried to bargain for her life. "Please, Marcus, my family. They don't know where I am," she whispered as he carried her unconscious to a vehicle. The trafficking connection. Marcus had planned to transport Katerina out of Miami that very night. Unlike his previous victims whom he had killed, he had decided that Katerina, young, beautiful, and now completely compromised by the evidence she had discovered, would be more valuable alive in the international trafficking network he was connected to. He had arrangements with associates in the Caribbean and South America who specialized in disappearing young women into forced prostitution rings. Katerina would simply vanish, another international student who had decided to return home, or transferred unexpectedly. But this time something went wrong. Maybe it was Katerina's foresight in documenting everything and sending it to Sofia. Maybe it was the security camera footage she had passed on the way in. Or maybe it was simply that Marcus, in his panic and rage, had finally made mistakes that would allow the truth to eventually come out. The discovery. On the morning of August 17, 2024 at 8:15 a.m., Sofia Martinez called 911 after receiving alarming messages and audio files from Katerina that had been set to autosend if Katerina didn't check in by midnight. Miami police arrived at Katerina's apartment to find it empty, but there were clear signs of her plans to meet Marcus and expose him. Detective Maria Santos, a 12-year veteran of the Miami Police Department specializing in crimes against vulnerable youth, was assigned to the case. "At first, we thought it might be a voluntary disappearance, a young woman wanting to escape her life," she recalls. But the evidence Sofia provided immediately suggested something much more sinister: abduction, trafficking, a predator who had been operating for years. What appeared to be a missing person case would soon reveal itself to be part of a much larger criminal network, and a race against time to find Katerina before she disappeared forever into the international trafficking system. The investigation begins. The audio recordings Katerina had sent to Sofia revealed conversations with Marcus Wellington, including explicit threats and evidence of coercion. But when investigators tried to locate Marcus at the addresses Katerina had provided, they discovered that Marcus Wellington was a carefully constructed false identity. "That's when we realized we were dealing with something much bigger," says Detective Santos. "The identity Katerina knew was completely fabricated, and we were running out of time to find her alive." Through analysis of security cameras, financial records, and phone data, police discovered that Marcus Wellington was actually David Chin Morrison, a 47-year-old man with a complex criminal past and multiple false identities across several states. The investigation also revealed that David operated an international sexual exploitation and human trafficking network disguised as a mentoring agency for international students. He had partners in at least 7 countries including South Korea, Russia, Brazil, Nigeria, and Ukraine. The race against time. As investigators worked to track David's movements and uncover his trafficking connections, Katerina Volkov remained missing, somewhere in South Florida or possibly already transported out of the country. The FBI joined the investigation, treating it as a potential international kidnapping and human trafficking case. They discovered that David had chartered a private boat on the night of August 16, presumably to transport Katerina to the Bahamas or another Caribbean location where his trafficking associates operated. Time was running out. With each passing hour, the trail grew colder and the likelihood of Katerina being moved further into the trafficking network increased. The investigation revealed that at least 23 young women had fallen prey to David's scheme in the past 5 years. Some, like Elena Petrov, had simply vanished. Others had been found dead in apparent suicides or overdoses. And still others, investigators now believed, had been trafficked internationally, their fates unknown. The question remained, was Katerina still alive? And if so, could investigators find her before she disappeared into a nightmare from which there might be no return? This case remains under active investigation by Miami Police Department and the FBI. Anyone with information about Katerina Volkov's whereabouts or similar cases is urged to contact authorities immediately.